So 2018 has closed its doors. The year that Stephen Hawking shed his mortal coil. The year our Lord and Savior had to say goodbye to us. And the year of... But hey, it wasn't all bad. We got an okay number of frames. Even if not all of them were fantastic. At least says I. And you know, opinions are a bitch to work with, and a lot of this video is going to involve clashing opinions, because Baruuk is the topic for today. Baruuk is the final frame of the year, sporting a pacifist monk design who just so happens to have a penchant for becoming an airbender and throwing out genocidal fists of death. Also, it's a bit weird that we got one frame that was based all around blood, gore, carnage, and just overall viscera, and the one that follows almost immediately after is a pacifist. And you see, I would make an Undertale reference here, but for whatever reason, they've been pretty prominent in my content as of late, and we're no longer in 2016. So, I'd like to consider myself above that now. So, when I said we'd be dealing with clashing opinions, I say that because reception to Baruuk has been pretty damn split. Some people love him, some people hate him and his stupid cyborg man bun thing. And I have to admit, I had pretty big fears for Baruuk. He was giving me some serious Wukong vibes, and to those who don't know, I currently consider Wukong to be the worst frame in the game. Simply because he has nothing to bring to a mission other than being able to take a hit. I'd get more into it, but this video is probably already going to be just as long as the wait for the Hydroid Prime trailer, Steve! But when Baruuk dropped, I gotta say, I was proven wrong, so I cannot in good conscience sit here and let people shit on Baruuk. So, yes, I am of the group that thinks Baruuk is a good frame. In fact, I like him more than I did Garuda, and I think he is the best frame of 2018. I know that's not saying much, but just work with me here. Look, in normal circumstances, I would not be sitting here defending a frame who decided that a good alt helmet would be to stick a lampshade on his head. But Baruuk is a great example for something I've been wanting to talk about for quite a while. And that thing is, a frame does not have to be better than another frame in order for it to be good. So, we're already 2 minutes into the video, so maybe we should start talking about the fucking monk now! Not Zenyatta here has a gimmick in that he is a pacifist who has anger management problems. The majority of his kit revolves around personal survivability and CC, however, he has a mechanic called Restraint, which controls access to his main DPS ability. We'll get into that later. Anywho, Baruuk's first ability, Elude, channels Baruuk's urge to be that one guy who would pull his Ethernet cord when you're fighting him, so that even though you may have thought you shot him, your bullets actually just phase through him. Elude makes him invincible to most direct forms of damage within a certain radius around Baruuk, so your bullets, your lasers, and so on will just pass right on through him. That is, as long as the damage is coming in from where Baruuk's one is positioned. Because yes, his one works kind of like a held volt shield, but as you increase power range, the shield covers more of Baruuk. At a certain range threshold, his one can cover his entire body and render him invincible to a number of damage types. Though it does not seem to work against AoE damage, and it does not work at all if Baruuk is attacking. Baruuk has a number of tools to stay alive, so it's easy to look at this one and think, well, I mean, it's a freaking invincibility button. What the hell else would it be for? The fact that it has so many limitations, though, makes it garbage for survival. I found that the primary use for his one is not survivability, but for reducing restraint. Baruuk's 2 and 3 also reduce restraint, but his 1 has the fastest potential, and it's also his only real passive way of reducing it. Every bit of damage you dodge with Elude, you lose some restraint. You're always going to be getting shot at, so yeah. And if you can find a bullet hose enemy who still hasn't understood that you're the equivalent of a lag god whose hitbox has transcended space-time, you can reduce your restraint extremely quickly. I understand that allies will be killing enemies left and right, but you can still find the occasional straggler like this to quickly get rid of restraint. It's a niche, but it works. For me, it's nice to just leave on and dodge the occasional bullet to add to your restraint reduction. So again, it's not really meant for survivability. You should toggle it on whenever you're trying to get rid of restraint. His second ability, Lull. Why'd you have to name it LOL? Now we have an audio clip of Rebecca saying LOL. LOL is arguably his best ability, but it's honestly a toss-up between it and his 4. It's a CC with an absolutely batshit radius, a lingering effect zone, and a hefty sleep duration. This is what makes Baruuk such a great CC frame, and it's what will allow you to shit all over things like excavation, mobile defense, interception, and certain bounties. Anything that is in LoL's radius will first begin to be slowed before being put to sleep. It is worth noting, however, that the CC does have a line of sight requirement. I've heard some people say that it's automatically trash because of the line of sight requirement, but I say no you. The thing that saves this ability from its line of sight requirement is the fact that its effect lingers after cast. It's not like a Loki disarm where it only catches people in the initial cast. LoL puts down what is basically a carpet that lasts for a pretty long while. For me, my LoL hangs around for about 7 seconds, so anything that wanders into that initial cast radius for the next 7 seconds will be affected by it and will be put to sleep for around 30 seconds or so. This saves the ability. And to be honest, the line of sight requirement even helps, I think. If it just completely penetrated the walls, that means you'd be getting enemies stuck in their spawn rooms and such, which means you'd have to go and kill them because they'd just be sleeping in there holding up the mission. But by having it instead be a lingering hitbox with a line of sight requirement from the cast point, that means you're not sleeping enemies in problematic positions, and most enemies are guaranteed to be affected by it as long as you have decent duration. There has also been complaints that LoL does not immediately sleep the targets, which is annoying, I agree. It really needs to be buffed and sleep enemies quicker, but it's worth remembering that before falling asleep, enemies instantly begin slowing down, which also affects their weaponry. So even before they're slept, they're already having less damage output. His 3, Desolate Hands, which is the worst name I've heard for an ability in quite a while, allows Baruuk to pull off his best Virgil impression, only far shittier and using what I think are darts instead of swords. Oh boy, and Desolate Hands shows once again that DE does not seem to understand that disarm powers are not useful unless it is on a wide scale. And I swear, half of this ability was made as a joke, because not only does it only disarm one target at a time, but it also, for some goddamn reason, has an AoE damage radius when a dagger hits an enemy, but for some reason, the AoE doesn't disarm additional targets. Like, are you fuck? And just to be even more of a prick, the daggers actually give you damage reduction, but you lose it as you lose your daggers. So it seems like the max amount of DR you can have is 90%, and each dagger gives you 10%. So what that means is that if at any point you fall below 9 daggers, which mind you, is not hard to do and takes no time at all, you're losing DR, which is no bueno. Unless you're doing something incredibly dumb and running 300% power strength, in which case, enjoy your 30 or so freaking daggers. But in most cases, you're going to be bleeding your dagger supply pretty damn quickly. DR is far better than disarming a few targets. It redeems itself somewhat by being recastable and having no duration though. Oh, but the fire range of the daggers is doubled if you have a lute on. So, have fun with that. Desolate Hands is certainly Baruuk's worst ability, and it shows a stunning misconception that DE somehow still has. But hey, most frames always have that one ability that is just kinda meh. And lastly, we have his 4, Serenity Storm. Oh, that's a typo. Serene Storm. This is what is supposed to be Baruuk's pillar ability. You know, the thing that you pick him up to use. And honestly, I think they did a good job. Serene Storm is an exalted weapon with amazing range, a great base crit chance, and extremely confusing attributes. Like, most of the fist waves have a 20-meter radius even without range mods, but some of the waves are affected by mods. The stat screen says it has a 0% status chance, but it actually can deal status procs. And it's not guaranteed procs from the stance either. For whatever reason, the wiki is claiming that the waves have fall-off damage, even though they don't. It's listed as having slash damage, but can't get slash procs whatsoever. I don't know what is up with this ability, but it's confusing as hell. Well, regardless, it's certainly a solid ability, with its defining trait being that the waves bypass walls and other obstacles. This is a fantastic thing, and it's probably the reason why it's locked behind the restraint gimmick. Doesn't explain why Excalibur's 4 is just better, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. This is your go-to power for getting rid of your usual trash. Your Lancers, your Butchers, your Shotgunners, etc. It can easily 1 to 2 shot these units even in the triple-digit level ranges. And because you don't need line of sight, you can just keep throwing the waves in areas that you think enemies are at, and you can score substantial kills. Also worth mentioning, if you put an enemy to sleep with LOL, your waves do get the melee stealth bonuses. So that's a nice bonus for when you're dealing with slightly tankier, medium-class units that might take more than 2 or so hits. It has a number of combo chains, usually resulting in anything that survives being punted into the nearest wall or levitated into the air. And then also punted into the nearest wall, because that's just how Baruuk do. But I usually just use the standard 2 hits and the slide attack. Lastly, his exalted weapon does not use energy. It works entirely off of your restraint gauge, so you can build up energy even whilst you're running around with 4 active. Now, Serene Storm has gotten some shit from people specifically because of its inability to effectively kill heavy armored enemies with its waves, like your bombards and your heavy gunners. And you know, I get it. I can actually see the logic behind thinking that that makes it a garbage power. Whoa, this thing is locked behind a gauge and has so much buildup but can't effectively kill heavies? Garbage, I say! I shall go back to Excalibur, who has the better exalted weapon. And the funny thing is, that logic isn't wrong. Excalibur does put out more damage with his 4 much easier. His 4 works extremely similar to Baruuk's. It's not locked behind a meter. It has even more range than Baruuk's waves as long as you're willing to invest in range mods. But here's the thing. Baruuk not being as good as Excalibur in terms of damage does not equal Baruuk's 4 being bad. Why? Because Baruuk's 4 can still handle these enemies. You can still kill the heavy units extremely quickly when you need to, without even having to deactivate your 4. You just can't do it by mashing the attack button. In a moment, I'll show you how and tell you no less than 5 different ways to deal with beefy targets. But the point is, it works. This is why I usually try to avoid comparing frames, because if a frame can work well, and keeps working well into high levels, I can't consider the frame bad even if there might be a frame that does it better. The frames at their core are concepts for players to latch onto out of interest. You might not like Excalibur Samurai design, but you might like Baruuk because of his monk pugilist ass-kicking design. And at the end of the day, you will still be able to use him effectively. Now, here is how to booty blast heavy units with Baruuk's 4 with 5 cool fresh tips. 1. Abuse the fuck out of slide attack direct hits. Remember, slide attacks have a much higher damage multiplier than normal attacks. Wanna see me one-shot a level 100 gunner? Wanna see me do it again?
Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out!
Oh, and by the way, this was without Condition Overload equipped. Here's the build I use. I usually just switch between Radiation and Corrosive as my element of choice. And for a bonus tip, Radiation damage handles trash and bombards better, whilst Corrosive has the advantage against heavy gunners. Oh, and slide attacks can also get headshots, remember? So if you wanted even more damage output from it, there you go. But it's honestly not even necessary to land one. You can either go for the body, a headshot, or that channel button we keep forgetting about. You'll still do the job either way. Even if you whiff some of your slide attacks hits, you can still end up doing about 50% of the target's health. So yeah, make sure you slide into the heavy's DMs if you're having issues killing them. Second tip, Condition Overload. Remember when I said that the waves actually do cause status effects? Yeah, well, Condition Overload benefits from that. Meaning you can drastically increase your damage output against heavies if you can fit it onto your build. Just be aware that it is still going to be pretty RNG reliant, but the damage is noticeable. Tip 3, if an enemy is asleep from lull, you can finisher them and kill them right then and there. And to be honest, you should be using lull quite often, so take advantage of it. Tip 4, and I know this is gonna sound like a meme, but yeah, I mean, this exists still. So, hey, those disarm daggers actually have a minor use after all. But I can't do this all from 20 meters away or delete a whole horde of heavies. Well, I mean, you actually can. I mean, look at this. You just have to be specialized into his 4. But even if you couldn't, this leads me to my 5th and final tip. You have teammates for a reason. There's nothing wrong with relying on them. And when the hell are you gonna be fighting 20 heavies anyways? Baruuk is perfectly respectable with his super good sleep CC and his trash clearing capabilities. I won't say he doesn't need a buff since, yeah, it's a bit silly that Excalibur has what is basically a better version of Baruuk's 4 without even having a limiter like Restraint attached to it. But the bottom line is, it works for what it is. If Baruuk's design intrigues you, you can do quite well as long as you're not expecting to rock the entire world. Now, the sooner we can get Tenogen for him, the better. Because again, Lampshade Head. Really, D?